Humiliation has a specific sound. It's not a cry, it's not a slap, it's not even a direct insult. It's the silence that follows, that deafening emptiness when all conversations stop, when all eyes turn, when the whole world seems to pause to witness your insignificance. It was precisely that silence that swallowed the living room that Sunday, when Mauricio pointed to the door and said, with the casualness of someone asking for more wine, that his father-in-law was out of place and should leave. Zé Enrique stood paralyzed in the middle of that immense room, with its double-height ceiling and imported crystal chandelier, holding a small box wrapped in plain paper. 63 years of life, 42 of honest work, 8 of solitary widowerhood, all reduced to that moment. An inconvenient old man who needed to be removed before he embarrassed the important guests any further. What no one in that room knew, neither Mauricio, with his superior smile, nor Jessica frozen near the kitchen, nor the 30-odd guests who awkwardly averted their gaze, was that someone was recording everything. And that those 3 minutes and 40 seconds of cruelty, captured in high definition, would cross the entire country in less than 48 hours, transforming a private pain into a collective cry for justice. But Zé Enrique would only know that later. In that instant, he could only feel the crushing weight of rejection as he walked to the door, his legs unsteady, his pride shattered, his new shirt drenched in sweat and shame. He had woken up at 5:30 in the morning, even though it was his day off, because a working man's body never forgets 42 years of alarms before sunrise. He made coffee in silence, in that tiny kitchen in the workers' village, where every object had its story. The coffee maker Marlene received as a wedding gift in 1985. The chipped cup he refused to throw away because it was part of the collection she loved so much. The hand-embroidered tablecloth that still smelled, if he closed his eyes and wanted to believe, of her perfume. He shaved with the care of a man going to an important event, moving the blade slowly, checking every angle in the stained mirror. His grey hair was neatly combed, his nails clean, the cologne, the one he saved for special occasions, the same bottle that lasted years because special occasions rarely came, applied sparingly to the sides of his neck. The light blue shirt, bought at the market the previous Saturday, still had the creases from the packaging. He put it on with pride, buttoning each button with fingers that trembled slightly, with anticipation. It wasn't fear. It was that good kind of anxiety, of someone about to see a loved one after too long. It had been 4 months since he'd properly seen Jessica. Only quick phone calls, always her in a hurry, always with excuses about work, commitments, the fast-paced life of Alphaville that didn't match the slow rhythms of the workers' village. Just quick phone calls, always her rushing, always full of excuses about work, commitments, the hectic pace of life in Alphaville that simply didn't align with the slow rhythms of Villa Operaria. He visited 5 different stores in the center of Osasco, comparing prices, evaluating quality, trying to find something that would wordlessly convey everything he wanted to express: respect, consideration, the genuine desire to be part of the new life his daughter had built. The executive pen cost 140 reais, almost half of his pension for that month. But he didn't hesitate. He asked for it to be engraved, "To my son-in-law, with respect, Zé Enrique." He wrapped it himself at home, using leftover Christmas gift paper, transparent tape, and a bow that he tried to make beautiful 3 times before giving up and accepting the crooked result. The first one left Villa Operaria at 10:15, packed with domestic workers, security guards, service providers, all those people who support the comfort of luxury condominiums but never live in them. Zé Enrique stood, holding onto the rusty iron bar, the gift protected under his arm, observing through the window as the city gradually transformed, from simple, closely built houses to commercial buildings, then to high walls and gatehouses with automatic barriers. The second bus was emptier, cleaner, with functioning air conditioning. He sat by the window and let the green landscape of the gated communities fill his view. It was beautiful, he had to admit. Well-tended trees, manicured lawns, clean streets where not a single candy wrapper was visible on the ground. So different from his own street, where the asphalt had potholes the city council had been promising to fix for years and the garbage collector came whenever he pleased. He got off at the right stop, checked the address on the crumpled paper he carried in his pocket, though he already knew it by heart, and walked the 200 meters to the Jardim das Acacias condominium. The guardhouse was imposing, with mirrored glass and 2 uniformed security guards. He approached with the humility of someone who knows they are entering a world that is not their own. The conversation was brief. A nod, the gate opened. Zé Henrique entered, feeling something strange in his chest, a mixture of pride, because his daughter lived there in such a beautiful place, and inadequacy, because he clearly did not belong. He waited in the garden in front of the block, sitting on a decorative bench, observing the parked imported cars, the muffled sound of music coming from some apartment, children playing in the pool. When he finally went up, it was already 11:50. He rang the doorbell. An employee in a black vest opened it. Beautiful, perfumed, speaking loudly, laughing even louder, with the ease of those who had always been comfortable in such environments. She hugged him, but it was too quick, mechanical, followed by a kiss on the cheek that didn't quite touch his skin. "Hi, Dad. Glad you came," she said, her eyes already scanning over his shoulder, seeking other demands. Food's on the table, drinks, and before he could reply, a friend appeared, pulling Jessica away, leaving him alone, amidst strangers. He tried approaching a group, smiled politely, met with cold glances. He was an intruder, a mismatch for the perfect decor. He chewed slowly, watching Mauricio across the room. His son-in-law, center of admirers, gestured animatedly, telling stories, drawing bursts of laughter. Tall, handsome, with the easy confidence of one who never proved anything. He wore an expensive brand shirt, a heavy watch. His hair cut in that effortlessly messy style, costing 300 reis at the barber. Time passed with painful slowness. Zé Henrique sat there, tiny on that immense sofa, holding the wrapped gift, feeling increasingly out of place. That's when someone asked Mauricio about his family. "My whole family is here, thank God," Mauricio replied, his voice loud enough to cut through other conversations. "Good people, classy people, you know how it is." The people around him laughed along, a chorus of approval that echoed through the room. He remained there, quiet, invisible, trying to convince himself he'd misunderstood, that Mauricio hadn't meant to exclude him, that it was just his way. He came over, swaying slightly, his smile too wide, his eyes dangerously gleaming, enjoying himself at another's expense. "What's that?" Mauricio nonchalantly tore open the package right there, before everyone, without ceremony. When he opened the small box and saw the pen, his expression changed. There was no gratitude, no polite pretense, just pure disdain. When he opened the small box and saw the pen, his expression changed. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't even polite pretense. It was pure disdain. Some guests laughed along, embarrassed, unsure how to react. "To my son-in-law with respect," he read aloud, imitating the formal, mocking tone. "Zé, brother, I use Mont Blanc pens. I don't even know where I'd sell this one." Zé Henrique tried to swallow the humiliation, but it was growing too big, blocking his throat, suffocating him. He began, with that tone of someone about to be exactly that. "But you're kind of out of place here, you know. This is a more upscale lunch. For my circle, people of my level. I think you'd feel more comfortable at home, watching your football, that sort of thing. So, if you don't mind." He made a vague gesture toward the door, like someone shooing away a stray dog. It was impossible not to witness what was happening. Impossible to pretend not to see a man being publicly crushed by someone who should respect him. He looked around, searching for Jessica, silently pleading for some intervention, for some defense. She was near the kitchen, frozen, her eyes wide, a hand over her mouth. But she said nothing, did nothing. She just stood there, torn between her love for her father and her fear of contradicting her husband in front of all those important guests. "I don't want to disrupt anything, I just wanted..." And having said that, he turned his back and returned to his friends, resuming a conversation as if nothing had happened, as if he had just resolved a minor issue, an inconvenience that needed to be removed. Zé Henrique remained standing there, in the middle of that beautiful, cold room, feeling his legs lose strength. The music returned, Someone laughed at something. Conversations resumed like waves covering a stone on the beach, erasing any evidence of its existence. He looked once more at Jessica. She had tears in her eyes now, but remained paralyzed, her hands clasped together, her mouth slightly open in an apology that couldn't escape. Tears welled in her eyes now, but she remained paralyzed, her hands clasped tightly together, her mouth slightly open in an apology she couldn't utter. His fingers trembled so much he almost dropped it. He walked to the door with steps that felt like they weighed tons, each one sinking deeper into a shame he never imagined possible. No one accompanied him. No one said a word. None of the 30-odd guests had the courage, or the decency, to even look him in the eye as he left. Zé Henrique stood in the building corridor for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to hold together something that was crumbling inside his chest. He rode down the mirrored elevator where his own reflection stared back at him. An old man in a new blue shirt, neatly combed grey hair, red eyes, holding a gift no one wanted. He looked like an extra who had lost his way from his own movie. He crossed the condominium garden under the strong midday sun. The heat was brutal, but he barely felt it. He passed the guardhouse. The security guards averted their gaze. Did they already know? Had they seen such humiliations before? Old men discarded by powerful sons-in-law. He walked to the bus stop and sat on the metal bench that burned through his pants. He waited there, alone, as families passed by laughing, children ran, dogs were walked. Life went on normally for everyone else, but not for him. It wasn't the restrained crying of a man who had learned to swallow pain. It was the crying of someone who collapses, who can no longer hold it in. Sobs shook his shoulders, tears soaked his new shirt, that liquid shame that streamed down uncontrollably. People waiting for the bus next to him averted their gaze, embarrassed. A woman offered him a tissue. He accepted with a nod, unable to speak. When it finally arrived, he got on, passed his ticket with trembling hands, sat in the back, and rested his head against the window. The city paraded by outside, indifferent. Alphaville giving way to intermediate neighborhoods. Then the periphery, back to Villa Operaria, back home. To that empty house where no one was waiting for him, where no one wanted him, where he was just another lonely old man in a country full of them. He took off the blue shirt, which now seemed like a ridiculous costume, folded it carefully anyway, because habits of a lifetime don't die easily. He lay on the bed in his underwear, looking at the cracked ceiling, feeling the weight of 63 years of life falling on him like a slab. It was impossible not to wonder where he had gone wrong. He did everything right, didn't he? He worked hard, paid the bills, raised his daughter with love, taught values, never hit her, never cursed at her, never disrespected her. Where did he lose her? At what point did Jessica transform into that woman who remained silent while her husband humiliated her own father? When did her love for him become less than her fear of displeasing a man like Mauricio? They only echoed in the silence of that room, mingling with memories that kept insisting on returning. Jessica at 5, twirling in a hand-sewn dress, shouting, "Look, Daddy, look how pretty I am." At 12, crying over mocked old sneakers, him promising new ones even if it meant over time. At 18, holding her high school diploma, hugging him, "I did it, Dad, because of you." At 22, her college graduation day, he cried in the audience. It was more than her achievement. It was validation that every sacrifice was worth it. When she was 7, Zé Henrique worked 3 jobs, 5 a.m. to noon at the metallurgical factory, 1 to 5 p.m. as a bricklayer's assistant, 7 to 11 p.m. as a parking attendant. He averaged 4 hours of sleep nightly. Marlene begged him to quit, fearing he'd die of exhaustion, but he couldn't. Jessica's private school tuition was steep, but she thrived, learning and reading in ways impossible at the neighborhood's dilapidated public school. Buckets caught the drips for 3 months. He slept to the plink-plonk of falling water. Jessica never knew. Marlene did, but said nothing, just holding him tighter on cold nights. Doctors spoke of expensive experimental treatments with slim chances. Zé Henrique sold everything valuable, the television, the stereo bought in 2-year installments, their gold wedding rings. It wasn't enough. Jessica, a new graduate, helped what she could, but her starting salary was small. Mauricio wasn't in her life then. He tried to fulfill it, until he realized caring for someone who no longer wants it is like holding water in your hands. It wasn't any of that. Lies were worse than silence. As Zé Enrique lay in bed, trying to grasp how his life reached this point, 300 kilometers away, in her São Paulo apartment, Mariana Silva was in her room, cell phone in hand, re-watching the video she had recorded hours earlier. Life had reached that point. 300 kilometers away, in her apartment in São Paulo, Mariana Silva was in her room, cell phone in hand, reviewing the video she had recorded hours earlier. Mariana was 22 years old, studying journalism, and had spent the last few months living with her brother Mauricio and her sister-in-law while looking for an apartment. She had never liked her brother much. He was always stuck up, arrogant, the type of person who confuses having money with having class. But that Sunday, what she saw went beyond arrogance. It was pure cruelty. She was recording silly stories for Instagram, showing the party decorations, when she noticed the tension in the room. She discreetly turned the camera and captured everything. Mauricio opening the gift, the cruel laugh, the expulsion, the old man leaving with his head down. Jessica's silence. Everyone's omission. Everyone just watched, some even laughed, and then went back to eating breaded shrimp as if nothing had happened. She didn't need to exaggerate or distort anything. The raw reality was shocking enough. At 11 o'clock on Sunday night, she posted it on Twitter with a simple caption: "When wealth doesn't buy education." At 6 o'clock on Monday morning, when Zé Enrique woke up after a restless night, the video had 500,000 views and was on the national trending topics. At 8 o'clock in the morning, news portals began to publish. Video of son-in-law expelling father-in-law from party goes viral and enrages Brazil. Elderly man humiliated at son-in-law's birthday. Case mobilizes social media. Who is the man who expelled his father-in-law from home? The internet wants answers. Zé Enrique learned all of this when his neighbor, Dona Noza, knocked on his door at 9:30 in the morning, distraught, almost breaking the doorbell from pressing it so hard. He went to the door in his bathrobe, eyes swollen from crying so much, not understanding her despair. Zé Enrique took the device, confused. On the screen, he saw himself. Mauricio's living room. The gift being rejected. The expulsion. His departure with his head down. All of it there, exposed, for the entire world to see. He felt his legs weaken again. He leaned against the doorframe. How did this end up on the internet? Comments were in the thousands, and almost all said the same thing. This is unacceptable. Where are the police? This is a crime. Someone identify this cursed son-in-law. Poor old man, my God. The daughter is just as guilty for remaining silent. Where are the police? This is a crime. Someone identify this cursed son-in-law. Poor old man, my God. The daughter is just as guilty for staying silent. Full name, company where he worked, social media profiles, everything exposed. The flood of furious messages began. His Instagram was inundated with hateful comments. The company's profile received thousands of messages demanding his dismissal. People started appearing in front of the condominium building. The video played on a loop, that painful scene endlessly reproduced, each showing a new stab at Zé Enrique's pride, but also a validation that his pain mattered. They knocked on Zé Enrique's door, requested interviews, wanted to hear his side of the story. He didn't answer anyone. He remained locked inside his home, watching it all with a mix of horror and fascination. It was his life, his pain, his deepest shame being dissected by millions of strangers. But at the same time, for the first time in a long while, he was seen, recognized, validated. A famous TV host sent a public message. Zé Enrique, if you're watching this, know that the whole of Brazil is with you. You deserve respect. She was being torn apart on social media just as much as Mauricio. Negligent daughter. Coward. Doesn't deserve a father like that. The comments were cruel, merciless. Her marriage was imploding in real time, broadcast to the entire country. While Zé Enrique tried to process all of this alone, Something he didn't know was that the video had reached places Mariana hadn't even imagined when she posted it. It reached a specific woman. A woman who had known Zé Henrique from a long time ago. From a life he had tried to forget. From a talent he had buried decades ago because the reality of supporting a family didn't allow for dreams. Helena Martins was 60 years old, an art curator in São Paulo, and was watching the news on Tuesday morning when she almost dropped her coffee cup. She knew that face. Not as Zé Henrique, the retired factory worker, but as José Henrique dos Santos, the young man in his early 20s who frequented the art studio in Bela Vista in the 1980s, who had an incredible talent for sculpture, who created pieces so beautiful they made teachers cry. They lost touch when he gave up everything to get married, to work in the factory, to be the provider Marlene needed. She tried to convince him to continue, said he could be great, that he had a rare gift, but he chose family. He chose a steady salary instead of the uncertainty of art. And he disappeared. Helena picked up the phone, called 3 different contacts until she managed to track down Zé Henrique's address. On Wednesday morning, she stood in front of his door, holding a folder full of things he thought were lost to time. When Zé Henrique opened the door and saw Helena standing there, older but recognizable, he felt as if 40 years had compressed into a single second. Because the secret Zé Henrique kept wasn't about crimes or betrayals. It was about who he was before he became just a father, a husband, a worker. It was about the artist who died so the provider could live. And when that story came to light, the Brazil that cried over his humiliation would discover they had lost something much greater in that process. A talent that never had a chance to flourish because survival always screamed louder than dreams. But Zé Henrique would only understand this when he opened that folder and saw the photos. Photos of sculptures he had created decades ago, some of them now worth fortunes, others in museums, all signed with a name he had abandoned, but that Helena had preserved. And suddenly the question was no longer just about who lost that Sunday lunch. It was about how many people Brazil loses every day. Talents crushed by necessity, dreams sacrificed on the altar of survival, while men like Mauricio inherit privileges they never deserved and use that power to crush precisely those they should honor. The justice that was to come would not just be about respect or humiliation. It would be about recognition, about seeing a man whole, not just for the role he had to play to survive. And when Mauricio discovered who the man he had expelled from his home truly was, when Jessica finally understood the magnitude of what her father sacrificed for her, the weight of that truth would be greater than any punishment social media could invent. Zé Henrique stood in the doorway for too long, just looking at Helena, as if she were a materialized ghost of a life he had buried so deep he sometimes forgot it ever existed. She had white hair now, pulled back in an elegant bun, modern framed glasses, clothes that spoke of someone who had succeeded in life. But her eyes were the same. Those eyes that 40 years ago had looked at his sculptures and seen something Zé Henrique himself couldn't perceive. Genius. "May I come in?" she asked gently, and there was so much compassion in her voice that he felt his throat tighten. She saw the photos on the walls, the old but impeccable furniture, the care of a man who had always maintained his dignity, even when the world insisted on taking it from him. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Marlene served thousands of dinners, where Jessica did her homework for years, where Zé Henrique ate alone for the past 8 years. Helena placed the folder between them, but didn't open it immediately. Like all of Brazil saw it. But I saw something no one else noticed. I saw you, José, the man I knew, and I thought, people need to know who you really are. The man I knew, and I thought, people need to know who you really are. Who had worked an entire lifetime, raised a daughter, did everything right, and was still treated like trash. But José, you were never just that. You were never just a laborer, and people deserve to know. His sculptures, pieces he had created between 1982 and 1987, in the years before Jessica was born, when he still attended the Bela Vista studio 3 nights a week after his factory shift. Human figures crafted in clay and bronze, capturing emotions so raw they were painful to behold. A man bent under an invisible weight. A woman with hands outstretched to the sky. Children at play amidst the wreckage. workers with faces that told entire stories of sacrifice. Each piece had been made with blood and soul. In the few precious moments he managed to escape the relentless exhaustion. He stayed at the studio until dawn, his fingers dirty with clay, creating miniature lives that seemed more real than reality itself. His art professor used to say he possessed the rarest gift, the singular ability to capture humanity in bronze and clay. I couldn't live on dreams. Critics spoke of a vanished artist whose raw, undeniable talent captured the very essence of the Brazilian worker like no one else. Curators searched for José Henrique dos Santos, the ghost sculptor who crafted masterpieces and then seemingly evaporated. "You became a legend in the art world," Helena said, and there was a mix of pride and sadness in her voice. "The artist who could have been a giant, yet simply vanished. I kept everything. I kept your name alive. Some of your pieces are in museums, others in private collections. One of them was auctioned last year for 200,000 reais, the kind that emerges only once in every generation. And yet, you gave it all up. Not out of cowardice, but out of profound love, out of unwavering responsibility, because someone needed to put food on the table, to pay for school, and to be the steadfast man his family crucially needed. You sacrificed your gift so your daughter could have a better life." And it was at that moment that Zé Henrique understood the full depth of the irony. He had given up being an artist, of perhaps being recognized, of having money and prestige, all to give Jessica a chance, so that she could study, grow, become someone. And she did grow and become someone. Someone who chose a man who would throw him out of his house for not being classy enough. Someone who remained silent while the father who sacrificed dreams for her was publicly humiliated. "Why are you showing me this now?" he asked, and there was something breaking in his voice. "And I think people deserve to know that when Mauricio threw you out of that house, he wasn't just throwing out an inconvenient father-in-law. He was throwing out an artist who is worth more in talent and character than he will ever be worth in his entire mediocre life." Helena remained silent for a moment, letting that sink in. Then she continued, "The press already knows, and I would really like you to be there, not to get revenge on anyone, but to be recognized, for people to see who you really are." What if he had continued? What if the world had given a chance to a factory worker who sculpted in clay? What if he hadn't had to choose between art and survival? They make themselves smaller so their children can be bigger. The mistake wasn't his. The mistake was a world that forces people to choose between talent and food, between dreams and dignity. Elderly man humiliated in viral video is renowned artist whose works are in museums. News portals exploded again. But now it wasn't just indignation. It was discovery. It was belated recognition. It was the full story finally being told. Zé Henrique accepted one, just one, with a journalist known for respecting her interviewees. He sat in front of the cameras wearing the same blue shirt from that fateful Sunday, washed, ironed, a small, silent revenge, and told his story, not with bitterness, but with painful honesty. He spoke about the talent he discovered young, about the nights in the studio, about the impossible choice when Jessica was about to be born, about the 42 years at the metalworks, the hands that could create art working with industrial metal, the fingers that shaped beauty now merely tightening screws, about Marlene, who always knew but never demanded, about the daughter he raised with everything he had, including the dreams he never realized. And when the journalist asked about that Sunday, about the expulsion, he said something that would be quoted for weeks. And when the journalist asked about that Sunday, about the expulsion, he said something that would be quoted for weeks. Character cannot be inherited, and talent is not measured in Mont Blancs or luxury condominiums. I lost 40 years of art, but I gained a daughter. At least I thought I had gained one. She watched her father talk about sacrifices she never knew, about a talent he killed so she could live better, about a love so profound it turned into invisibility. For the artist she never knew because he chose to be a father instead. For an entire life of kindness she had repaid with cowardly silence. Zé Henrique was in the backyard when she arrived, tending the soil, planting tomatoes as he did every year. He heard the doorbell, went to the door, and there she was. Red eyes, no makeup, wearing simple clothes, looking, for the first time in years, like the Jessica he knew. "Dad," she said, and the word came out broken. "About the art, about everything you gave up. I didn't know. That Sunday, I should have told Mauricio to shut up. I should have stood by your side. But I was afraid, Dad. I was afraid of losing everything I had built, and I didn't realize that what I had built was worth nothing." Jessica moved back to the house in Villa Operaria 3 weeks later. She filed for divorce. She quit her job at the company that valued appearances more than competence. She started over, smaller, simpler, but by her father's side, relearning who she was before trying to be who Mauricio wanted her to be. Zé Henrique's sculptures were displayed with perfect lighting, each piece a window into the soul of the Brazilian worker, into dignity amidst hardship, into the humanity that persists even when the world insists on crushing it. Zé Henrique walked through the exhibition with Jessica by his side, Helena guiding, explaining each piece to emotional visitors. He saw people crying before his works. He saw critics taking frantic notes. He saw young artists looking on with reverence. Helena guiding, explaining each piece to emotional visitors. He saw people crying before his works. He saw critics taking frantic notes. He saw young artists looking with reverence. Not because he was eventually recognized, but because he had made the right choice for the right reasons. Art was left behind, but Jessica existed. She erred, got lost, but she was there now, back, relearning what he had always tried to teach, that value is not in how much you have, but in who you are when no one is looking. The video haunted him. Every job interview, someone asked. Every time he introduced himself, someone recognized him. He learned the hard way that reputation takes years to build and seconds to destroy. It was waking up every day and remembering that he had expelled an artist whose works were worth more than anything he would ever own. It was knowing that he treated dignity like garbage and would now carry that forever. It was understanding too late that class cannot be bought and respect cannot be demanded. It is earned or not had. But curiosity won out. Inside, only 3 handwritten lines. He folded the letter, stored it in the drawer where important things were kept. It wasn't reconciliation. It didn't change the past. But it was recognition. And sometimes, recognition is all a man needs. He returned to the garden, hands in the earth, planting life in soil that had so often seemed sterile. The sun was warm on his back. Jessica was inside preparing lunch. On the living room table, an invitation to her second exhibition, this time at MASP. Beside it, an old photo of him and Marlene, young, smiling, unaware of all that was to come. To be invisible, and yet maintain dignity so firmly that one day, when they are finally seen, people will realize the light was there all along. They were the ones who weren't looking properly. It was the man who did the expelling. Because Zé Henrique always knew who he was, even when the world insisted on not seeing. And knowing who you are, regardless of recognition, is the only victory no one can take away. Others build cathedrals of silence, brick by brick of invisible sacrifice. And when time finally reveals which construction had a true foundation, it's already too late to rebuild what was built on sand. And this, perhaps, is the difference between men of substance and men of veneer. Some withstand time. Others peel off at the first rain.